Okay, so are you ready to dive into some like seriously fun philosophy?
I am ready.
All right, because today we're going to be exploring Zorba the Buddha
Hmm.
by Osho. And this is all based on some excerpts that you sent over.
Yes.
It's really all about finding that sweet spot where deep thinking meets, well, a really good party.
Yeah, what's so cool about Osho is that he kind of throws out the rule book on what it means to be spiritual. He's like, why choose between being a mindful meditator and someone who loves to dance? You can be both.
Hmm. I'm intrigued already. So where are we headed on this deep dive into Zorba the Buddha?
Yeah.
What's the main idea we're unpacking today?
Well, Osho believes that humanity has been stuck in these rigid dualities for way too long, like mind versus body science versus religion seriousness versus joy. He
Hmm.
wants to break us free from that. His vision is a new man who transcends those limitations and embraces both sides of the coin.
Hold on. I need to take notes. New man, no more dualities.
Yes.
Okay, I'm ready. But what does this new man actually look like in real life?
So imagine someone who can appreciate a complex scientific theory and burst into spontaneous dance. Osho's new man is grounded and spiritual, practical, and mystical all at the same time. He doesn't see these things as opposites, but rather as different expressions of the same life force.
So it's not about picking a side, but about integrating all these different aspects of ourselves.
Exactly.
I can see how that could be really liberating.
Exactly. And Osho gives us this fantastic metaphor to illustrate the point. He compares humanity to a tree. Religion is all about the flowers, those beautiful abstract ideals. Science, on the other hand, is focused on the roots, the material reality. But a tree needs both to thrive and what connects those two. Osho says it's art. Art becomes the bridge between the spiritual and the material.
Wow, I love that metaphor. It makes so much
Mhm.
sense. It's
Oh.
like we've been trying to grow a tree with only flowers or roots, and then wondering why it's not thriving.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think the question for you listening right now is where in your life do you feel pulled between those opposites? Are there areas where you're denying yourself joy because you think it's not spiritual enough? Or maybe you're so focused on practicality that you've lost touch with your inner sense of wonder?
Ooh, that's a good one. I know I've definitely been guilty of thinking I need to be super serious to be spiritual, but Osho seems to be saying we can ditch the seriousness and still be on the path to enlightenment.
Hmm.
That's a pretty radical idea.
It is, and it's where Zorba and Buddha come in. Osho uses these two figures, Zorba the Greek, who's all about enjoying earthly pleasures, and Buddha, the embodiment of spiritual enlightenment, to represent the two sides of the new man. He's saying, we don't have to choose. We can be Zorba and Buddha.
Wait, so you're telling me I can party like Zorba and reach enlightenment like Buddha? Sign me up?
But it's not just about partying, of course. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience. The joy and the sorrow, the light and the shadow, the earthly and the divine. Osho believes that trying to deny any part of ourselves only creates inner conflict and suffering.
Okay, that's a pretty powerful idea. It's like we've been given permission to be our full, messy, complicated selves and still be on a spiritual path.
Yeah.
I love that. But
Yeah.
how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, Osho would say it starts with recognizing that seriousness is actually a disease. He believes that taking ourselves too seriously is what blocks us from experiencing the joy and freedom that's available to us.
Hold on, seriousness is a disease. That's a bold statement. Does he say we should just be laughing and joking all the time?
Not exact. It's not about being frivolous or irresponsible. It's about cultivating a sense of lightness and playfulness in our approach to life. Osho believes that when we loosen our grip on the need to control everything, we open ourselves up to a much richer experience.
So it's more about an attitude of non-attachment, of not taking ourselves or our problems too seriously.
Precisely. And to illustrate this point, Osho uses this fascinating metaphor of a sandalwood tree. Now, sandalwood trees are known for their beautiful fragrance. But here's the interesting part. Poisonous snakes are attracted to that fragrance and often live in the trees. But the sandalwood tree itself remains pure and unaffected by the snakes.
Okay, I'm following so far. Beautiful fragrance, poisonous snakes. But what does this have to do with non-seriousness?
Well, Osho is saying that just like the sandalwood tree, our awareness can remain pure and untouched even when surrounded by life's challenges and negativity. He's reminding us that difficulties and setbacks don't have to diminish our inner peace.
That's a really beautiful image. It's like saying we can choose to focus on the sandalwood fragrance of life, even when there are poisonous snakes around, but that's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
How do we actually cultivate that kind of resilience?
It starts with awareness. How often do you find yourself getting caught up in the seriousness of life? Where do you tend to overthink, overanalyze, or just generally take things too seriously?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think we all have those areas where we could lighten up a bit, but it's hard to break out of those patterns, isn't it?
It can be, but with a little bit of awareness and a willingness to experiment, we can start to inject more playfulness into our lives. Remember, Osho believes that joy and playfulness are essential ingredients for spiritual growth.
So what you're saying is a little less seriousness, a little more Zorba energy might actually help us on our path to enlightenment.
Exactly. It's not about throwing out the Buddha altogether, but about finding a way to integrate the two. Remember, Osho's vision is the new man who embraces the full spectrum of human experience, and that includes a healthy dose of fun and laughter.
Okay, I'm definitely on board with that. So we've explored the concept of the new man and the importance of non-seriousness. Where are we headed next on our Zorba the Buddha journey?
Well, this is where things get even more interesting. Osho has some pretty radical ideas about how we access truth and understanding. He believes it's not about words or scriptures, but about direct experience. He's all about going beyond the limitations of logic and reason.
Wait, going beyond logic? Isn't that a little dangerous? It sounds like he's advocating for like throwing out all critical thinking and just blindly believing whatever feels good.
That's not quite what he's saying. Osho isn't against logic or reason. He just believes they have their limits. He sees them as tools that can be helpful, but also as potential traps if we become too attached to them. He believes that true understanding comes from direct experience, from that aha moment where we see something for ourselves beyond the confines of words and concepts.
So it's about trusting our own intuition and inner knowing. It's like he's saying, don't just take my word for it. Go out and experience it for yourself.
Exactly. Osho believes that we each have an innate capacity for wisdom and understanding that goes beyond what we can learn through books or lectures. He even goes so far as to say that scriptures are useless.
Whoa, hold on. Useless. That's a pretty strong statement. Is he saying we should just throw out all the spiritual teachings and traditions?
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that those teachings are pointers, not the destination itself. Osho believes that the real journey begins when we step outside the comfort of our beliefs and allow ourselves to experience the unknown directly.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So it's not about rejecting knowledge or tradition, but about not letting them become a substitute for our own personal experience.
That's a great way to put it. Osho believes that genuine spiritual understanding comes from within, not from external sources. And to access that inner knowing, we need to be willing to let go of our preconceived notions and open ourselves up to new possibilities.
This is really making me think I know I have a lot of beliefs about spirituality that I've just accepted without really questioning them. It's like I've inherited them from my culture or my upbringing. But what if I challenged those beliefs? What if I allowed myself to explore other perspectives?
That's exactly the kind of questioning Osho encourages. He even uses this term divine madness, which might sound a bit scary, but it's actually about this willingness to step outside the boundaries of what we think we know and embrace a more intuitive, less rigid way of knowing.
Divine madness. Okay, I'm officially intrigued, but I have to admit it does sound a little bit like, running around naked in the streets claiming to be a prophet.
Well, maybe not quite that extreme, but I see your point. Osho is definitely pushing us to embrace a more expansive way of thinking and experiencing the world. He believes that true wisdom often comes from those unexpected moments where we allow ourselves to be surprised, to be challenged, to be shaken out of our comfortable routines.
So for our listener, the question here is, what beliefs have you accepted without truly experiencing them? Are there areas where you're holding on to a rigid framework that might be blocking you from seeing things in a new light?
That's a great question to ponder. Osho would say that true wisdom is not about accumulating knowledge, but about cultivating a sense of openness and curiosity, a willingness to explore beyond the limits of what we think we know.
Okay, that's a powerful challenge. It's like he's inviting us to become explorers of our own inner landscape, and I have a feeling this exploration is going to get even more interesting as we dive deeper into Zorba the Buddha, what's coming up next.
Well, we can't talk about Osho without talking about love, and as you might expect, he has a pretty unique perspective on this universal topic. It's not just about romance or finding the one, it's about a way of being in the world, a state of openness and acceptance that permeates every aspect of our lives.
Oh, I knew we'd get to love eventually. It's definitely a topic that's close to all our hearts. But how does Osho's view of love differ from, say, the traditional romantic notions we're bombarded with in movies and pop culture?
He sees love as something much more expansive and transformative than just a feeling or an emotion. He believes that love is a force, an energy that connects us to something greater than ourselves.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this force of love. It sounds pretty intense.
Osho believes that love is not something we find, but something we become. It's about radiating love outward rather than seeking it from external sources. And he makes a very important distinction between what he calls needy love and mature love.
Needy love versus mature love. I'm intrigued. What's the difference?
Needy love is that familiar kind of love that's based on lack, on this feeling that something is missing within us that needs to be filled by another person. It's that desperate yearning for someone to complete us, to make us whole.
Ooh, I think we've all experienced that kind of love at some point in our lives. It can be so intoxicating and addictive, but also really painful when it doesn't work out.
Exactly. And Osho would say that's because it's based on a false premise, on this idea that we're somehow incomplete without another person. Mature love, on the other hand, is a completely different animal. It's a joyous overflow, a sharing of our abundance with the world without any expectation of getting something in return.
So it's not about clinging or grasping, but about giving freely without any strings attached. That sounds pretty challenging.
Yeah.
How do we cultivate that kind of love?
Osho believes it starts with self-love, with recognizing our own inherent worthiness and completeness from that place of wholeness. We can then extend love outward to others, not from a place of need or desperation, but from a place of abundance and joy.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects to the idea of the new man and the transcendence of dualities. It's like we're breaking free from that limited view of love as something we need to acquire or possess, and instead we're embracing it as a way of being in the world.
You're getting it.
Huh.
And I think the question for you listening right now is, what kind of love are you drawn to? Are you still seeking that external validation, that completion from another person, or are you ready to step into a more mature, more expansive way of loving?
That's a powerful question to contemplate. I think we all have some work to do in that area. But thankfully, Osho provides us with some pretty insightful guidance on how to cultivate a more fulfilling and liberating approach to love.
He does, and we're going to explore that in more detail as we continue our deep dive into Zorba the Buddha.
All right, I'm ready for more. This has been a fascinating journey so far, and I can't wait to see where we go next. Listeners, stay tuned for more insights from Osho on how to embrace both our inner Zorba and our inner Buddha.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Osho's Zorba the Buddha. Before the break, we were talking about Osho's pretty radical idea of love, that it's not something you find, but something you become.
Right, and he made that really interesting distinction between needy love, which is all about seeking completion from someone else, and mature love, which is more about radiating love outwards from a place of inner wholeness.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really key concept from Zorba the Buddha, the power of surrender.
Surrender. Okay, I have to admit, this one always makes me a little bit nervous. It sounds so passive, like giving up on my goals and ambitions, but I'm willing to hear Osho out. What's his take on surrender?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand that Osho's idea of surrender is not about weakness or resignation. He actually sees it as the ultimate strength. He believes that true surrender comes from a place of deep trust and acceptance.
Okay, I'm listening. So it's not about giving up, but about trusting. But trusting what exactly? It seems like a lot of people talk about trusting the universe,
Yeah,
but that always feels a bit vague and abstract to me.
I get it. It's one of those things that's easier said than done. But Osho is basically saying that by resisting the natural flow of life, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves. It's like swimming against the current. You might get somewhere eventually, but it's going to be a lot more exhausting and painful than if you just let the current carry you.
Okay, that's a helpful image. So instead of struggling and fighting against life's challenges, we should try to flow with them.
That's the idea. Osho uses this beautiful metaphor of a river to illustrate the point. Imagine a piece of driftwood floating down a river. It doesn't resist the current. It simply allows itself to be carried along.
Okay, I can picture that. But here's where I get stuck. Aren't we supposed to be setting goals, making plans, taking action to create the life we want? It seems like surrender is the opposite of that.
It's not about giving up on our goals or becoming passive. It's more about recognizing that we don't have complete control over everything. And sometimes our carefully crafted plans need to be adjusted or even completely abandoned.
So it's about being flexible, adaptable, open to new possibilities.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there's a greater intelligence at work in the universe, and that sometimes what we think is best for us might not actually be in alignment with the bigger picture.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects to Osho's idea of going beyond logic. It's like he's saying, trust your gut, trust your intuition even when it doesn't make sense to your rational mind.
You're getting it, and it's not always easy, especially in our culture that values logic and control so highly. But Osho believes that when we surrender to this greater intelligence, we open ourselves up to a deeper wisdom that can guide us in ways we never could have imagined.
I'm willing to give it a try, but how do we actually practice surrender? It's not like we can just flip a switch and suddenly become these carefree, trusting beings.
You're right. It's a process, and it starts with Becoming aware of where we're holding on too tightly.
Hmm.
Where in your life are you resisting the flow? Where are you trying to force things to go your way, even when it's creating stress and frustration?
Oh, that's a good question.
Hmm.
I know I tend to overthink things, to get caught up in my own plans and expectations. I also have a hard time letting go of control, especially when it comes to things that are important to me.
That's very common, and it's in those moments of resistance that we have an opportunity to practice surrender. It might be something as simple as letting go of the need to be right in an argument, or surrendering to the fact that you can't control the weather, no matter how much you wish you could.
So it's about noticing those moments of tension, of resistance, and choosing to let go instead of fighting.
Exactly. And it's not about suppressing those feelings or pretending they're not there. It's about acknowledging them, allowing them to be there, and then making a conscious choice to loosen your grip.
This is starting to make more sense, but it still feels a little bit counterintuitive to everything I've been taught about success and achievement.
I understand, but think about it this way. When we're constantly striving, pushing, trying to control everything, we're actually closing ourselves off to new possibilities. We're so focused on our own agenda that we might miss out on opportunities that are right in front of us.
Okay, that's a really interesting perspective. It's like by letting go of our need to control, we're actually opening ourselves up to a wider range of options.
Precisely. And Osho believes that this openness is essential for spiritual growth. He sees surrender as a way of aligning ourselves with the natural flow of the universe, of tapping into a source of wisdom and creativity that's far greater than our own limited minds.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued by this idea of surrender, even though it still feels a bit scary, but I'm willing to keep exploring it. What else does Osho have to say about this concept?
Well, he emphasizes that surrender is not a one-time event. It's a continuous process. It's something we practice moment to moment, day by day. And he offers some practical tools for cultivating surrender, like meditation and mindfulness.
Oh, meditation. I knew we'd get there eventually.
Yeah.
I've been trying to meditate more regularly, but I always struggle with my busy mind. How does meditation help us surrender?
Meditation is all about training the mind to let go of thoughts and attachments. It's about cultivating a sense of presence and awareness in the present moment. And as we practice this letting go, we naturally become more open to the flow of life.
So it's not about emptying the mind or achieving some kind of blissful state. It's more about observing our thoughts without judgment and allowing them to pass.
Exactly. It's about creating space within ourselves, about loosening the grip of our ego and allowing something greater to emerge.
This is starting to feel really profound. It's like through meditation, we're learning to trust that there's something bigger than us holding us, guiding us, supporting us.
You're getting it. And that trust is at the heart of surrender.
Okay, this has been a really enlightening conversation so far. I'm starting to see how all these concepts, the new man, the importance of non-seriousness, the power of surrender, are all interconnected. They're all pointing towards a way of being in the world that's more open, more trusting, more aligned with the natural flow of life.
Beautifully said, and I think that's a great segue into our next point, which is about Osho's unique perspective on experience versus belief. Remember we touched on that earlier?
Right, he's all about direct experience,
Yeah.
about not blindly accepting what we've been told. It's like he's saying, don't just take my word for it, go out and see for yourself.
Exactly. And he extends this approach to all areas of life, including religion and spirituality.
Hmm.
He challenges us to move beyond the limitations of dogma and belief systems and to seek our own truth through direct encounter.
Okay, so it's not about memorizing scriptures or adhering to a rigid set of rules. It's about having your own personal relationship with the divine.
That's a great way to put it. Osho believes that genuine spirituality is a lived experience, not a theoretical concept.
Okay, that makes sense. I think a lot of us have been conditioned to believe that spirituality is about following a certain path or adhering to a particular set of beliefs.
And Osho would say throughout the rule book, he encourages us to explore different paths to experiment, to be open to new ways of experiencing the sacred.
So it's about finding what works for you, what resonates with your own unique being.
Exactly. He even goes so far as to say that scriptures are useless and that genuine prayer is spontaneous and heartfelt, not just rote repetition.
Wow. Okay, so he's really shaking things up. It's like he's saying, don't just go through the motions. Put your whole heart into it.
Exactly. He's calling for a more authentic, more embodied spirituality.
All right, so for our listener who's maybe feeling a bit lost or confused about their own spiritual journey,
Yeah.
what's the takeaway here? What's the question we should leave them pondering?
Let's ask them this. What beliefs have you accepted without truly experiencing them? Where in your life can you be more open to direct personal insight?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think we could all benefit from asking ourselves those questions. But it can be scary to question beliefs that we've held onto for a long time, can it?
It can be, but it can also be incredibly liberating. Osho believes that when we let go of our rigid beliefs and open ourselves up to new experiences, we create space for something much more profound and transformative to emerge.
Okay, I'm feeling inspired. It's like he's challenging us to become explorers of our own inner landscape, to trust our intuition and to be open to the unexpected. And speaking of the unexpected, didn't Osho have some pretty radical things to say about the importance of non-seriousness?
He did, and it might seem counterintuitive, but he actually believes that joy and playfulness are essential ingredients for spiritual growth.
Okay, wait a minute. Are we really saying that having fun can help us become more enlightened? That sounds a little too good to be true.
I know, right? But Osho makes a very compelling case for it. He believes that when we take ourselves too seriously, we create all sorts of unnecessary suffering. We become rigid, inflexible, and closed off to new possibilities. But when we allow ourselves to lighten up, to embrace the absurdity of life, we open ourselves up to a deeper joy and freedom.
So it's not about being irresponsible or frivolous. It's about cultivating a sense of playfulness and lightness in our approach to life.
Exactly. Osho believes that laughter is one of the most powerful spiritual practices. He even compares meditation to drunkenness.
Meditation as drunkenness. Okay, now you have to hear more about this.
He's not saying we should all go out and get drunk, of course, but he's using this metaphor to illustrate the idea that meditation should be a joyous, liberating experience, not a rigid, disciplined practice.
So it's about letting go of control, surrendering to the moment, allowing ourselves to be surprised and delighted by the unfolding of life.
You're getting it. And Osho believes that when we approach life with this sense of playfulness, we become more receptive to spiritual insights and experiences.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all ties together. The new man, the power of surrender, the importance of the direct experience, the embrace of non-seriousness. They're all facets of the same gem, aren't they?
Beautifully said. They're all pointing towards a way of being in the world that's more whole, more integrated, more aligned with the true nature of who we are.
This has been such a rich and insightful conversation. I'm feeling inspired to take a more playful approach to life, to loosen my grip on control, and to be more open to the unexpected. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit curious about that whole meditation as drunkenness thing.
I know it's a provocative image, and it's one we're going to explore in more detail as we continue our deep dive into Zorba the Buddha.
All right, listeners, stay tuned. We've got more wisdom and insights to share from Osho on how to embrace the fullness of life without taking ourselves too seriously. Welcome back to our deep dive into Osho's Zorba the Buddha. We've been exploring some pretty mind-blowing ideas about how to live a more joyful, fulfilling life.
Yeah, and we've been talking about how Osho encourages us to embrace both our inner Zorba, that life-loving, celebratory part of ourselves, and our inner Buddha, that wise, serene observer.
Right, and that means challenging a lot of our preconceived notions about what it means to be spiritual.
Mm.
We've been talking about letting go of seriousness, surrendering to the flow of life, and even questioning our long-held beliefs.
And all of these ideas, as different as they might seem, are actually pointing towards the same goal, a life that's more whole, more integrated, and more aligned with our true nature.
Okay, I'm following you so far, but I have to admit my mind is still a bit blown by that metaphor Osho uses to describe meditation, comparing it to drunkenness.
Mm.
Can we unpack that a little bit more? Because I'm picturing like a wild, chaotic meditation session where everyone's just lost their minds.
I know it's a very provocative image, isn't it? But Osho is actually using that metaphor to challenge our preconceptions about what meditation should be. He's saying that it shouldn't be a rigid, disciplined practice, but rather a joyous, liberating experience.
So instead of trying to control our thoughts and force ourselves into a certain state of mind, we should just let go and allow whatever arises to arise.
Exactly. It's about surrendering to the present moment, allowing ourselves to be fully present with whatever thoughts, feelings, or sensations are arising without judging them or trying to push them away.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does that relate to drunkenness? I'm
Yeah.
still not quite seeing the connection.
Well, think about the feeling of being drunk. There's a sense of looseness, of letting go of inhibitions, of being fully immersed in the experience of the moment. And Osho is saying that meditation can offer a similar kind of liberation, of freedom from the constraints of our ego and our habitual patterns of thinking.
So it's about accessing a different state of consciousness, one that's less controlled, more spontaneous, and ultimately more joyful.
You got it. And that's where the connection to Zorba comes in. Remember, Zorba represents that part of ourselves that's uninhibited, joyful, and fully engaged with life. And Osho is saying that we can bring that same energy into our meditation practice.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all fits together. It's like we're not trying to become someone else in meditation. We're actually trying to reconnect with a part of ourselves that's already there. That part that knows how to let go, to celebrate, to be fully present in the moment.
Exactly. And when we allow that part of ourselves to emerge, we open ourselves up to a whole new dimension of experience. Osho believes that this is where true spirituality lies, not in rigid dogma or ritual, but in the direct experience of the present moment in all its fullness and richness.
This is really making me rethink my whole approach to meditation. Always thought of it as something serious and disciplined, something I should be doing to improve myself. But what if it's actually about letting go of the shoulds and allowing myself to simply be?
That's a great question, and I think it speaks to a larger point that Osho makes throughout Zorba the Buddha, that life is not about striving or achieving, it's about embracing the journey, the process, the unfolding of experience.
So instead of focusing on the destination, we should enjoy the ride.
Exactly, and that brings us to another key concept from Zorba the Buddha, the idea that life is inherently meaningless.
Wait, meaningless. That sounds kind of depressing. Are you saying there's no point to any of this?
Not at all. What Osho means is that life doesn't have a predetermined purpose or goal. It's not about achieving something specific or fulfilling some grand plan, and in a way that's incredibly liberating.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this liberating meaninglessness.
Think about it. When we believe that life has a specific meaning or purpose, we often end up feeling pressured to live up to that meaning, to achieve certain goals, to fit into a certain mold. But when we let go of the need to find meaning, we free ourselves to simply experience life as it is without judgment or expectation.
So it's like taking the pressure off, allowing ourselves to just be present with whatever arises without needing it to mean something or lead somewhere specific.
Exactly. And Osho believes that this kind of radical acceptance is the key to unlocking true joy and fulfillment. When we let go of the need to control, to define, to make sense of everything, we open ourselves up to a deeper experience of life's richness and beauty.
This is blowing my mind a little bit. It's like by surrendering to the meaninglessness of it all, we actually create space for a deeper, more authentic kind of meaning to emerge.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and I think it speaks to the core message of Zorba the Buddha, that true freedom comes from embracing the paradox, from holding the tension between seemingly opposite ideas.
So it's about being Zorba and Buddha, serious and playful, surrendering and taking action, finding meaning in the meaninglessness.
Exactly. It's about living a life that's full of contradictions, a life that embraces the full spectrum of human experience, a life that's both deeply spiritual and wildly joyful.
This has been such an incredible journey into the world of Osho's Zorba the Buddha.
Mhm.
We've covered so much ground, from the concept of the new man to the power of surrender, from the importance of non-seriousness to the liberating meaninglessness of life.
And this deep dive has just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in Osho's teachings, and I encourage you to continue your own exploration, to find what resonates with you, to challenge your own assumptions, and to discover your own unique path to a more joyful and fulfilling life.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Zorba the Buddha. Remember, life is dance, so don't be afraid to let loose, to embrace the paradox, and to celebrate the wild, messy, beautiful journey of being human.